Thank you so much for joining us tonight at the May 1st, 2023 meeting of the Burlingame City Council, and especially celebratory council meeting tonight that we're looking forward to. Sorry. Okay. We're still learning the whole hybrid technology thing and trying to make sure it all works. So call the meeting to order. It is a little after 7 p.m. And our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. And I would be honored to ask our honoree, Mary Herman, to join us. Please stand and, oh, careful, Mary. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In somewhat typical Mary fashion, I asked ahead of time if she'd be comfortable leading us in the pledge. And she said, well, of course, that's the one that starts, "My country, 'tis of thee." And I said, no, I don't think so.
I love
Anyway, if we could do the roll call, please, Madam City Clerk.
Councilmember Stevenson,
Here.
Councilmember Ortiz, Councilmember Beach, here. Vice Mayor Coulson, here. Mayor Brownrigg.
Here. And note for the record and for the members attending tonight that Councilmember Ortiz sends his regrets. He's traveling overseas. Can't be here tonight. Report out from closed session. There was no closed session, so there is no report out. Next, we have upcoming events, and I have a few. I welcome any others from colleagues. But in our Park and Rec department, they are looking for summertime camp counselor hires. So if you know a young person who, now, Margaret, this is a position that would pay something, I hope. Yes. So if you know a young person who'd like to earn a little money and maybe even earn some public credit, please send them to the Park and Rec department. It's a lot of fun. The Kids Night Out, where our Park and Rec staff make sure that parents, young parents, have a chance to finally have some time to themselves. Those nights are slipping away. There's only 2 more. The next one is on May 12th from 6 to 9 p.m. So bring your kids along and then go out and enjoy a great dinner in Burlingame. May 7th, our library is hosting a really fabulous conversation. I didn't mention last time that there's a ticket price to this because it's such a special event. But Ambassador Michael McFaul, who was our ambassador to the Soviet or to Russia, is in dialogue with Jackie Spear about the future of Russia and Ukraine. That's May 7th at 5:30. Tickets are $100, so because it's a fundraiser for the Library Foundation, but it will be a fascinating conversation. I know Ambassador McFaul, and he is one of the nation's brightest diplomats and foreign policy observers. So I highly recommend it if you can make it. And then finally, on my list, and then I'll invite others, May 9th, we don't normally do this, but I'm going to advertise a neighboring cities event. So on May 9th in the San Mateo Library, there is a session on how to electrify your home and how to save money. So if you have any interest in finding out about convection cooking and all of the other Go Electric policies, you can go to a panel at the San Mateo Library from 6 to 7:30 on May 9th. So those are some of the upcoming items. Are there any others from colleagues to notify? Yes, Councilmember Beach.
Thank you for the opportunity. There is a competitive opportunity for the city of Burlingame that is near and dear to many of our hearts. Bike to Wherever Day is an annual event that's happening, sponsored by the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition, and you can sign up to bike wherever, somewhere that might interest you, whether it's around town or to work, May 18th, 19th, and 20th. And they are tracking by city who pledges to do so. So let's put that out there, Mr. Mayor.
Great. May 18th, 19th, 20th. Mary, get your bicycle ready, okay?
Right. And we do have some upcoming bike share programs that will be starting here in Burlingame with Spin Bike. So you don't even need a bicycle. You can just borrow one for a couple hours to participate.
Excellent.
And that program is starting on May 11th, and there will be a table at the farmer's market on May 14th, where they'll be demonstrating the bikes and giving away helmets and free riders to users.
Great, great. So so that's terrific. Do you have anything, Vice Mayor? Okay, well then we're done with upcoming events, which brings us to the reason why many of us are here tonight. And that is a proclamation for somebody who has been really a pillar of our Mary Herman. We're going to say a few things, Mary, and and then we'll invite you to the podium and we'll come down and take a picture and all that. But I want to kick things off. I'm sure my colleagues have something to say too. First of all, when it comes to public service, I always like the quote from Gandhi that says, the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. And I know, Mary, that that's been a hallmark of your life all along, always giving to other people. Now, I have to say that when I was thinking about this evening, and I know your sense of humor, which is not always in every public servant. I have to break the news to you. Not every public servant has a sense of humor, but Mary does. And so I was reminded also of one of my favorite library quotes, which is Groucho Marx, who said, outside of a dog, let me make sure I get it right. Outside of a dog, a book is man's best friend. Inside of a dog, it's too dark to read. So that's Groucho for you. I normally, in the interests of time, I normally shorten proclamations because they're usually terribly boring. But in Mary's case, I'm going to read every word because she deserves every word and they're all special. So this is the proclamation from the city of Burlingame to Mary Herman, honoring her on her 100th birthday. Mary Herman was born on January 19th, 1923, and celebrated her 100th birthday this year. Ms. Herman has been an invaluable member of the community for decades with her commitment to history, literature, and the betterment of society. Ms. Herman served on the library board of trustees from 1993 to 2005. In 1995, Ms. Herman was one of the founding members of the Burlingame Library Foundation and served as the foundation's first president, helping to fund library programming and events. During her time as a trustee and a foundation member, she helped to preserve and oversee the renovation of the main library and the Children's Library on Easton, which, as an aside, my family will always be grateful that we have a branch on Easton. It was a godsend with little kids. Ms. Herman helped to secure the underwriting for the Lane Room in the main library, a space that for years has helped to educate and inspire the community through a plethora of events. Ms. Herman, this one caught me by surprise, but it shouldn't have. Ms. Herman is referred to as the mayor at the Truesdale due to her community engagement and wealth of knowledge. Ms. Herman's dedication to advocacy for the community has seen her serve on the advisory group for the Peninsula Healthcare District and work to maintain the Wellness and Fitness Center on Truesdale Drive. Ms. Herman was a dedicated member of the faculty of the College of San Mateo and San Francisco State, where she was beloved by students and colleagues alike for her teaching and mentoring in speech, hearing, learning disabilities, and special education. And finally, Ms. Herman is the embodiment of public service and dedication to her community, and the city is grateful to call her our own. And so therefore, I, Michael Brownrigg, as the mayor of the city of Burlingame, and on behalf of this entire city council and every council member who went before us, of which there's at least one in the audience, do hereby honor and celebrate Mary Herman on her 100th birthday and thank her for her dedication to the city. Please join me in.
This is such an exciting experience for me and also a very happy one. And I'm so delighted to see so many friends here. And I just don't know where to begin. After all those words, it's pretty hard to make any comment, but I thank you so much. You know, I just I've lived in Burlingame half of my 100 years. So go ahead and sit down. Please don't stand while
Hey, Mike.
I only have about a half hour speech for them, so it won't take that long. But anyway,
This is so people are at home.
I'm just so happy to be here, but I think my happiness is seeing so many of you. I can't believe it. And I think about when I first started and came on and what was on the library commission and got involved with the library and setting the foundation, as I think you mentioned, and Chris Cannon is here, and we both worked very hard on that. And that's how I got to know all that wonderful staff at the library and the people here at work around the city hall. And I treasure all these experiences. I feel with all the groups that we've worked with and that we've organized organizations around here. And most importantly, I treasure to gain long-term friendships that I've been able to enjoy all the years that I've worked around here. And I thank you again. To me, living in and being a part of Burlingame is an honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Oh, to be 100.
So I think what I'm going to do is let Mary sit down. And so take comments from the public, anybody who'd like to speak. I know my council colleagues would like to say something probably. And then we'll ask you to stand up one more time, Mary, and take a photo. So let's do it that way. So I'll start with colleagues. Would any colleague like to say anything? Councilmember Beach.
Sure. No, thank you. And happy birthday, Mary. So it's wonderful to have you here with us. You are a legend in this community. Your name is known far and wide through all generations. And I have another little tangential connection is my children went to Burl Pres Nursery School. So I still feel deeply connected to many of the folks there. And I know also, in addition to all the magnificent things that Mayor Brownrigg read off, how connected you are and what an active member of that faith community and all you do at the Truesdale on behalf of that community. So thank you so much for your engagement in a million different ways. And that's usually how it works in communities, right? If you got the volunteer kind of seal on your head, you just kind of find yourselves in a million different places, and you are just such an amazing community member. So thank you for your service to our city.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Coulson.
Thank you. Well, happy birthday, Mary. What a lovely salute and celebration for you today. And I just want to acknowledge all the people, your daughter, and family who have come here from far and away to celebrate you today. That's just amazing. And at 100 years of age, you are a person who I look up to, and I would love to be one day, just like you, participating for over 50 years in public service. When you first start getting involved in Burlingame in any capacity whatsoever, there's one name that continues to come up over and over again, and it's Mary Herman. And you are resolute in your commitment to the city, and you are beloved and a treasure for all of us. You are essentially and really an absolute treasure of Burlingame. So thank you very much. And I have very much appreciated getting to learn about you and know you over the years.
And Councilmember Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mary, just happy birthday. It's an amazing milestone, but I think the more amazing part is just the 50 years that you've made an impact on Burlingame and all the children that have grown up here, and just a shining example for being involved. That's how cities work. That's why I think all of us are up here. It's just that commitment to make Burlingame a better place. And clearly you've made your mark on Burlingame. So thank you.
Yeah.
I think by any measure, all of us would have to run for city council 10 more times each before we even nearly amounted to the amount of work you've done. So,
And I don't see any of us running against you as mayor of the Truesdale.
No,
oh, you've got that.
landslide.
You got that one locked up. I am going to, I'm so sorry, my daughter is a diabetic and I need to make sure I keep paying attention to that. There we go. Sorry about that. I want to open it up to the public, but unusually I am going to direct the first comment to our former colleague, Mayor Ann O'Brien Keegren, because she was a big part of helping us organize tonight's event. And I wanted to give, if I may, Mayor O'Brien a chance to speak first.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Brownrigg. Feels different being on this side of the. I just want to congratulate you, Mary. 100 years. I don't know what your secret is. I'd love to know what it is. But it's been such a pleasure working with you for many years, since I was actually on the Planning Commission and again on the City Council. And when you say you were the mayor of Truesdale, I definitely believe that. I think you were either the first or the second resident. It was kind of a competition between you and Dale Perkins. And so when I went to the opening, you gave me the grand tour. And I've enjoyed our lunches together, our friendship, all our conversations over the years. And I just congratulate you again. And also to congratulate you for 50 years of service. I mean, that is what I call dedication. And Burlingame is very, very lucky to have you as one of their residents. So again, thank you and congratulations.
Now I welcome comments from anybody who would like to say something. Don't feel compelled, but please come to the podium. Oh,
Yes. Hi, Chris Cannon. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Mary, I'm not surprised you're 100. Of course, Mary would live to be 100. I met Mary in 1993 when she was chosen for the library board, and I was on the board at that time. And I think the very first meeting she came and I thought, how could I not know this woman already? She is so fantastic. And right away, we started talking about things like we needed more money. And by the next year we had, with Mary's leadership, really, Alice Gauthier and I trooped along behind her, and she led forward for the Library Foundation, which, as you all know, is a very, very successful foundation that now has 24 members on our board. We only had 9, I think, when we began. So they've kept up a good following in your footsteps, Mary. Mary's an amazing woman. I don't have to tell you that, but the things that she's done, I kind of have her as a model in my life. She is a good mother. She is a great educator, and she's a lover of our community and works hard. So I don't know what more you could do. You've done it all. I'm so happy to see you. I remember Jim and I used to talk about Mary being a beautiful person. She's beautiful outside and beautiful inside. So I'm happy for this celebration for you. Congratulations, Mary, and thanks for everything.
thank you. Thank you, Chris.
Hi, Mayor, City Council members. Hi, Mary. I'm Sylvia. I'm the Executive Director of the Truesdale, and I'm here representing all of our residents and all of our staff. And we just want to say we love you, Mary. You are an absolute ray of sunshine in our lives, and we are so thankful to be in yours. So thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. Cheryl Fama, who just went through her own transition.
Hello, Cheryl Fama, recently retired CEO of the Peninsula Healthcare District, and proud to say I'm a friend of Mary's. So, you know, she is the mayor of the Truesdale, although my name is on the license. But you are the mayor of Truesdale, and Mary also, and thank you for remembering or bringing it up in the proclamation. She was instrumental in helping us save the gym and fitness center that sort of suddenly closed all, you know, by the previous operator. And Mary did a couple great things about that. She was tenacious as she can be. See that little smiley face? There's tenacity there. And I think that's what makes you be 100 is the tenacity. But you know what she did for the Peninsula Healthcare District? Nobody comes to our meetings. But if Mary wanted to get that gym built, we had 60 and 70 people coming to our meetings to support that episode and that chapter in our life. So you really do get credit for us helping me and helping us save that gym. And then I don't know if you, I bet you all can imagine this already. You probably know it, but I used to visit the gym. I'd go in and say hi and see who's there. Mary would be on the treadmill. She would talk to me for 20 minutes while she's on the treadmill. I was getting short of breath watching her. So she is absolutely a role model to all of us. Volunteerism, educator, friend. And I have said this to you personally many times, but I'll say it publicly. She is absolutely the role model. I have threatened my daughters since they were able to listen to me, that I wanted to live to be 100. And one of the reasons I just retired was because I only have 25 years left. And you are my role model. You've shown me how I can make it. And I want to be like you when I grow up. So I'm looking forward to our lunches again. And thank you to the city for making everybody aware of what Mary's done, because sometimes when you've done it over a long period of time, memories fade. But in the class act that Burlingame is, you recognize good people and you remember to say some nice things about her, and she deserves every bit of it. So Mary, I love you. I hope you'll always be my friend, and lunch soon, okay? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jane Doty McKenzie. I'm one of the pastors at Burlingame Presbyterian Church. We have our contingent over here, and you may think she has retired. She's also the pastor at the Truesdale. Mary is the one who single-handedly got our services up and running in their theater. And so every Sunday morning, she hosts a group of residents at the Truesdale to come and join in with our services remotely. And I've only known Mary for the last 4 years, but have come to love her as a deep woman of faith. And just want to let everybody know that her work is continuing. She is nowhere done. Thank you, Mary.
That's one. A nice marriage of church and state and the Truesdale. Would anyone else like to share any memories or comments? Well, Mary, thank you so much. We're going to come down and take a picture. So I'm going to ask you to stand up one more time. Is that okay? I know it's up and down, up and down.
Got me. Okay.
Yeah. We'll tell you 25 minutes, right?
I'm overwhelmed. So wait. Oh. I'm so sad. Yes, buddy, absolutely. I remember when you ran for council, yeah. You know, that's what they really. Okay. Oh.
No, it absolutely would not be rude.
So what?
I didn't expect you to sit through the master fee schedule.
I
I hope you're all going to have a birthday dinner somewhere fun.
I would only say that I wish every meeting could start like this.
The whole audience.
Yeah, yeah, and on a high note. We will give just a minute for everybody to get themselves organized. Well, Chief, that's a tough act to follow, but so I think we can move on. Our next item is a presentation from our Chief of Police on the Racial and Identity Profiling Act, which is an annual report required by the act. There it goes.
So good evening, Mayor Brownrigg and council members. I'm here tonight to report on the Police Department's Racial and Identity Profiling Act data, or more conveniently known as RIPA. So before I actually get to the data, I just want to give a little background on RIPA for those who may be watching who are unfamiliar. Next slide, please. So RIPA was created in 2016 as part of Assembly Bill 953. It requires police departments to collect data on all of their stops and detentions and report that data to the California Department of Justice. It's being done in an attempt to combat bias-based policing. Some may be more familiar with the term racial profiling, but this data actually covers a lot more than just race. So bias-based is more the appropriate term. Next slide, please. So the state built in a timeline for compliance. As you can see, if the department has 1,000 or more officers, they needed to compile data in 2018 and report out in 2019. 667 to 999, compile data in 2019 and report out in 2020. 334 to 666, compile data in 2021 and report out in 2022. And then 333 or less, compile data in 2022 and report out in 2023. So having 40 sworn officers, we fall into the last category. But collecting the required data is difficult and complicated. So we made the decision to start compiling data a year earlier than is required for really two reasons. The first was we wanted to make sure we worked out all the bugs before we actually had to report the data to DOJ. And secondly, we felt it was just important data to track. And so we just really didn't want to wait, that long. So starting a year earlier, we actually worked with our vendor to beta test their software, which is now used by several other agencies to help collect their data. And actually, Sergeant Dave Perna really deserves a lot of credit for the implementation and the maintenance of our RIPA program. He's been the go-to person for all this. So really, a lot of thanks goes to Sergeant Dave Perna. Next slide. So the reason we need the special collection software and the reason the state gave us so much time to comply is because of the amount of data we are now required to collect on each stop. And as you can see, it's pretty extensive. We have to report the date, time, and duration of the stop, the location of the stop, the reason for the stop. We have to report the actions taken by the officer during the stop, the results of the stop, the perceived race and ethnicity, perceived gender, perceived to be LGBT, perceived age, the degree of English fluency, the perceived or known disability, the officer's ID number, their years of experience, and the type of assignment from the officer. So needless to say, being able to sort and compile this data appropriately and accurately is complicated, and it requires extra costs and extra work. Next slide, please. Okay, so two items I want to point out before we look at the data. First is that the law requires that we report the officer's perception of the person's identity, not their actual identity. So the data may not be entirely accurate, but again, that's the requirement, and we have really no say in how we do this. And secondly, we're required to track all detentions, not just officer-initiated detentions. So for example, if someone calls in a suspicious subject walking down their street and we make contact with the subject, that counts. If a retail store calls in a shoplifter and we contact the suspect, that counts. So it's important to remember when looking at the data that these numbers aren't exclusively police numbers. They're a combination of police-initiated contacts and dispatch calls. And again, the law requires that we include the dispatch calls. So we have no say in this either. Next slide. And then, of course, where to find the data. If you go to burlingame.org and you go to the department tab, police tab, transparency tab, and the RIPA tab, you can get all this information on our website. Or if you can actually just search Burlingame RIPA, and that's the first thing that pops up. And it's also actually available on the state DOJ website for all agencies. And there's actually probably more numbers there than are on our home Burlingame website. So you can go to those places and find the data for yourself if you want to look into it. Next slide, please. So here are the raw numbers and the percentages. And again, these categories are chosen by the state. So this is what they give us to work with. We have no say in how we want to divide up the categories and things. This is the what is mandated. So if you look, the first chart is race. As you can see, it's 36% white, it's 27% Hispanic, 15% Asian, 9% Middle Eastern, South Asian, 8% African American, 2% Pacific Islander, and then there's less than 1% that's Native American. And then the second chart shows gender, which is 67% male, 32% female, and then less than 1% that's transgender or non-conforming. The third chart shows the reason for the stop. That's 78% traffic violation. It's 16% criminal activity suspected, 3% consensual encounter, and then there's a small percentage of where we warrant services, probation, parole checks, and miscellaneous school issues. And again, these categories are set by the state. So for some reason, they want us to track these specific school issues. I'm not really sure why, but this is in there as far as what they need. And then we also, the last graph is result of the stop, and 38% resulted in a warning, 26 an infraction citation, 18% was no action, and 10% involved an arrest, which could include, getting cited out in the field. 2% resulted in a psychiatric hold, and then there's a small percentage of miscellaneous outcomes, which have to do some of that school stuff. Next slide. So this is an interesting slide here. It's a general breakdown of the contacts instigated by the public versus the contacts generated by the officers. And as I mentioned earlier, we're required to track all detentions, not just officer-initiated detentions. So as far as the breakdown, it's pretty similar, except for one thing that I thought was interesting that stood out to me is that if we look at the African Americans seem to be called in more by the general public than they do as far as officer initiated. If you look, that's the third highest thing called in by the public, but yet it's the fifth by officers. So I thought that was kind of an interesting stat, and probably does skew our data a little bit as far as officer initiated. Next slide. So I think the most important question is, how do we interpret data? With any set of statistics, they can be interpreted in many different ways. As far as our RIPA statistics, and what I don't think you can do, and most data experts agree, is compare it simply to our population demographic, because it's too simplistic and it's just not realistic. We don't have a wall around our city. Access to Burlingame is not limited to just residents. We live right in the middle of a very diverse metropolis. Non-residents pass through Burlingame all the time to get from point A to point B. Non-residents work in Burlingame. We have retail, restaurants, hotels, and a lot of industry on our east side. And I would say that the majority of the people who work in Burlingame don't live here. We're a destination city for visitors for the same reasons. People want to visit Burlingame for our restaurants, our retail stores, and our parks and trails. It's a diverse group from all over the Bay Area, and our hotels host people from all over the world. So my opinion from working and living in Burlingame is that those RIPA numbers are pretty indicative of who you see frequenting Burlingame. And I actually think it's a great thing that people from all backgrounds feel welcome and safe visiting Burlingame, socializing in Burlingame, and working in Burlingame. And in addition, in 2022, the police department did not have any complaints having to do with bias-based policing. So next slide. So at this point, I know we should probably talk about the interpretation, and I welcome any questions and comments.
Thank you very much, Chief. Questions for the chief from anybody? Comment? Vice Mayor Coulson.
Thank you, Chief Matucci, for the presentation. It seems to me like what will really be interesting is the long-term trending and patterning of data to see if there are any sort of continued biases or over stopping or over policing of a particular gender or group or something. And we just have, I guess now 2 years, it looks like 1-2 years. So really, I think the important thing will be down the road a while.
I think that's probably what the state was getting at is to get these numbers for a few years and see what happens.
And do you have any sense of how we compare to other similar agencies in San Mateo County? Or is our data all about pretty close?
You know what? That's a great question. I don't know. I haven't compared us to any other cities.
So one could do that by looking on the DOJ database.
website. Also, I think if you go to any city website on the peninsula, I'm sure they all have their RIPA data posted on their website, so we could compare. But I never thought to do that.
Yeah, it might be interesting just someday to understand, are we sort of, is San Mateo County kind of similar, a pool, especially say maybe Millbrae and even San Mateo and Hillsborough, sort of our adjacent cities. So just something to think about down the road.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Yes, Councilmember Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief, in terms of the data, are they mandating the perception or the perceived data from the officer's perspective? Or do they actually triangulate it against CDL information, which would correct at least 1 or 2 of the data?
No, that's, I think one of the issues that I have with it is its perception, and they don't compare it to anything. So you don't actually know, I think in a perfect world, or if I was the law, I would want the perception, and then I would want what it actually is so that you can compare. Yet at this point, we have nothing to compare it against because it's only perception.
And this second question is, has there been any substantive changes in the data set that has to be collected since the program went into place?
Not that I'm aware of. Again, we've only been doing it for 2 years, and some of these other agencies have been doing it longer, but from when we started, it's the same.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes, Councilmember Beach.
Thank you, Chief, and thanks for the presentation tonight. So proud of our city for getting ahead of this a year early than we had to, and appreciate the transparency in the presentation and the thoughtful conversation. And and actually your insight on how you look at interpreting the data is helpful because it does show, the data does show whether there are calls for service by police or by citizens. There is a higher percentage, even based on, it seems to be a higher percentage of people of color, whether it's Black or Latino, are getting called out proportionally to not only Burlingame's population, but even to the county population. And you're right, we have travelers coming in and out and lots of people working. What do you feel like are some of the opportunities of things we can learn from this, or how we move forward and continue to improve? Are there opportunities for more training, or how do you see us moving forward here to continue improving?
So yeah, there's always opportunities, for training. New officers get a block of bias-based police training while they're in the academy. When they come out during their field training, they get additional training from their field training officer in bias-based policing. When they're out there stopping, it's covered during their training. Post requires that we do an update every 5 years. We did our last update in April of 2020, actually right before the whole George Floyd thing. When I put out my email that, I put that in there. And interesting enough is one of the things that one of the input I got after that George Floyd incident, when we put out our training records, how people thought once every 5 years just wasn't enough. That was the one thing that came out of the whole thing. And so we're not due, we're in compliance, but we're not due again until 2025. So we are looking for something to supplement to do in between those 5 years. And there's a lot of companies that offer private training. Post is always coming up with different trainings. So we're looking into it. I would like to kind of do that. I don't think 5 years, once every 5 years is enough. And so we're looking into that. So I think training, I think keep an eye on the statistics to make sure you don't see them change from year to year. Try to whittle them down to something that might be a little nicer. But one thing I do want to mention, I went to a conference late last year, Chiefs conference, and there was a data analyst that gave a presentation on RIPA data and how to analyze things. And they were talking about, one of the things they're talking about is how do you compare it? You can't really compare it to your town demographics because, again, there's not a wall around your city and things happen. And so he said, you can run it against a bunch of different types of police calls, but all police calls seem to have some type of bias related to them. Some people call more than others. Certain groups, call for different things. So it's like, what do we use, instead of population that can gauge? And he said, the best thing you can use, it's not perfect, but it's really one of the best gauges, is traffic accidents in your city. Because they're accidents and they don't favor anybody. And so I ran those numbers for 2022, our traffic accidents, and I looked at the race, and they are very, very similar to our RIPA data. Very, very similar. So I think that was a good thing, and I will continue to keep doing that to see that we stay similar. That's another thing we're going to be doing, but yeah.
No, it's good that we're slicing and dicing the data. I mean, one thing just on our website, those charts seem to me pretty, not super user friendly. They're kind of hard to read, because percentages, but also like drilling down more in traffic violations by race. That would be like even some of the things, it sounds like they're on the state website, but maybe if we don't have to search as far, but we could do more drilling down, calls for service by officer or by community. Community should know. What's our community? Maybe there's opportunities for reflection and training and education in our community through, who knows, the library or outreach. But I think drilling down on some of the additional data, it's good what we have there and it's a good start, but even more transparency would be great.
Yeah, so we do use a private vendor, and so they continue to try to tweak the data so that that it's better. And so what they give us is kind of what they have at this point and what will suffice for the DOJ. I did ask about the traffic statistics, and they were able to manually get those by hand. I didn't have time to put it in the slideshow, but I think, and I know you emailed me earlier, but we're talking about the traffic data and who's getting pulled over for what based on race. And I think what you're getting at here is equipment violations are kind of seen as pretext stops, and they're stopped so that we can see who's driving and get in the car and potentially make an arrest or do a search, as opposed to a moving violation, which is somebody running a red light that we don't have a lot of control over. And I ran that, and so they have the data. I can send it to you, but I compared. There's no difference between the figures are the same for moving violations and for mechanical violations. There's no big differences, and the number of people stopped for kind of generally fits the same overall RIPA data. So I would be concerned if I saw that there was a higher rate of people of color getting pulled over for equipment violations, because we all know that that's sometimes a pretext stop, and so it's
Right.
not. It's all correlates well. So that was a great question. Thank you, and I was able to dig that out of our vendor today.
Appreciate that. I mean, we're really proud of our police department, and I think this is just an important process to go through and have these conversations. Not always the most comfortable, but what can we learn and what can we continue to do better? Thanks, Chief.
Thank you very much, Chief. I echo Councilmember Beach's comment that it's great to see you already deploying this, already leaning in as opposed to pushing back. It doesn't surprise me knowing you and your senior team, but I think it's great that we're already out there collecting data. There is a very tired piece of business advice in Silicon Valley. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And so the fact that we measure means we can see if we have a problem or we don't. And I think I love the fact that you're looking for ways to find a random sample, which is the traffic accident sample, which is non-biased because it's random. So I just love the way you guys are thinking about that. I love that you're embracing this and not resisting it and not complaining. It's more work for somebody. And thank you to Officer Perna if he was the one who led the charge, because data collection is never easy. It's messy. So I don't really have anything to add. I do like the thought very much of Vice Mayor Coulson's to over time begin to compare ourselves to other cities. Not so much whether it reveals bias, although it may, but also just to see the rates of stops. You know, are we ahead? Are we behind similar cities? Kind of interesting to know. I'm not sure what you take away from that, but it'd be interesting. So I really just appreciate it and appreciate the presentation. I am going to open it up for public comment. Chief, if there's something that requires a response, I'll invite you back up. So with that, I'd like to open up for public comment. Is there any member in the audience who'd like to speak? Seeing none, Madam City Clerk, is there anybody in our virtual guest list that would like to say anything?
There is not. We have 8 attendees, and there are no hands raised, and I have no email.
Okay. Yes, Councilmember Beach.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I think we would be very supportive, I would think, of any additional resources that need for additional training department or any other resources for the community to continue to have community conversations about these important issues.
Yeah.
But certainly for our police department, early training as opposed to 5-year.
Yeah, I concur. I don't think you can ever train enough, whether you're, you know, in the military, in the police, and anything where there's where the state is using force. I think we can never train too much, and certainly appreciate that suggestion. Obviously, you have a job to do too, so you can't everybody everyone training all the time. There wouldn't be anybody actually on the street, but I think that's it. And this is an annual report, is it, Madam City Manager? No.
No, the police department needs to provide the information on a regular basis, I think annually, but bringing it to the city council is not required. We just thought it was prudent to do so because it's the first time we're going through this.
I appreciate it. I think it would be, I think it'd be helpful, frankly, to have a once a year presentation if it's not too much of a burden on the chief. I think it shows that we're all paying attention and we all care. And if you don't ask, then people think maybe you don't care, and that wouldn't be, I think, the right signal for us to say. Do colleagues agree with that? Okay, well, with forbearance, Chief, we look forward to seeing you a year from now, plus or minus. Thank you. Okay, thank you for that. That takes us now to our consent calendar. There are a number of items on.
Can we check sorry,
I beg-
Mr. Mayor, can we check public comment on non-agendized items first?
What about public?
Public comment on non-agendized?
Oh, I beg your pardon. I missed that. Sorry. Yes, of course. I beg your pardon. So this is the time in the hearing when we ask any members of the public if they'd like to address the council on an issue that is not on the agenda. We can't reply, but we can certainly listen, and we do listen. And so with that, I'll open it up for public comment. I don't see any member of the audience here rushing to the podium. Is there anybody online?
No.
No, but still, we checked the box. Thank you. That now takes us to the consent calendar. There are a number of items. Anybody like to remove any of the items on our consent? I see shaking heads. Are there, Madam City Clerk, are there any members of the public who would ask us to address any of these?
There are none.
In which case, I would welcome a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent item calendar or sent calendar items 8A through F.
Second.
Thank you. A motion by Vice Mayor Coulson, seconded by Councilmember Stevenson. If we could do a roll call vote.
Councilmember Stevenson,
Yes.
Councilmember Beach,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Coulson,
Yes.
Mayor Brownrigg.
Yes, and so the motion passes 401, right? Yeah, 401. That takes us now to our public hearings, and the first one is item 9A, which is the master fee schedule. And I'm just so sorry that our audience left before we got to this.
It's
And-
such an exciting report every year.
Every
We have Helen Scott, our finance.
year.
Okay, good evening, Mayor and Council member. The first item, I guess we go over here, master fee schedule. Each year, the city council approve a master fee schedule as part of budget process. The staff performance annual review evaluation to ensure the fee reflect a current cost to price service based on the service user fee recovers policy. At the April 3rd meeting, the council approved the resolution intended to hold tonight public hearing to update the city's master fee schedule. Tonight, the council is asked to conduct public hearing and to approve the master fee schedule for fiscal year 23-24. This concludes my staff report. I'm here to answer any question you may have.
Thank you very much, Madam Director. Are there any questions for Director Scott?
I have sort of, I mean, I went through this thing with a pretty fine tooth comb, but I'll defer to colleagues first, maybe.
Take out the comb.
All right. Okay, these are just questions. So I noticed that on pages 117 and 71, which is citywide city clerk fees and police fees, that we have fees in here for providing VHS and DVD copies and quote tapes. I checked with the city clerk and she said we no longer provide that kind of, is that what we do still?
We don't do VHS tapes, but I believe that our police department might still DVD or no, you're doing. Yeah, yes, sometimes.
Okay.
Need to, I know.
Just clean, I was thinking just clean up the language because we have this like obsolete, technology in here and it's going to look like we've never updated it. Like, oh, well, you didn't update this since you used VHS, which was 1985. So maybe I'll just these are just kind of things I can make as suggestions. So on page 13, building fees, we waive, I noticed we waive fees for installation of residential solar. So I just throw out something for future consideration, which is waiving fees for installation of electric appliances, electric heat pumps, and other decarbonizing renovations. So it's not that we have to solve it today, but I'm just curious if anyone else thought that might be worth.
I'm not sure if we want to go back.
Do you want to just take them all and then we can come back? Again, another time?
How many do you have?
A lot.
Well, I would leave it to your judgment whether we want to make a correction in this cycle, in which case we should talk about them.
Well, maybe what we could do is how about like on this one, so we have a correction, that one will be handled by city clerk to figure out what the proper language is for the next round. On page 13, I guess I'm seeing nodding. So is is there a reason that I think this is maybe a Kevin Gardner question or a Lisa question?
Do we have to do is there a fee at all for installing electric? I guess if you're doing
Let's have Kevin come back, but the way this process normally works, we introduced this, we did the resolution of intention to do this and we provided the full number of fees. So, we could have made changes going into this meeting. Now, generally, when we do this meeting, this is kind of the end of it. And then we come back a year from now. If there are changes that absolutely need to be made, we can certainly come back again. You have to wait 60 days to put the fees into effect. And so we don't want to miss that window of getting the fees in place at the beginning of the fiscal year. So we're on a bit of a time schedule. That doesn't mean that if there are things that absolutely need to get changed, we can't change them.
I think maybe even if we just outline them for potentially next year, and we look at it over time, it's fine by me.
Would you
Maybe
do that verbally, or would you like to write a memo that gets part of the public record
I can do both. Maybe I can just kind of hit them,
through them?
take them really quick, and then I can send them all to the staff.
Okay.
And then we'll just over the next year. and I'll be the mayor, so I can like be the one who's responsible for
Private through.
managing all this stuff. Okay, so there's a question about what we can maybe waive for appliances, electric decarbonization. So under page 22, under engineering fees, it's supposedly we charge for tables, planters and chairs. And I'm guessing, I guess it's just checking to see like, do most of our businesses actually permits and pay for these? I see a lot of like beautification planters like going up, and I was just sort of like, no one's ever asked me like that they had to pay a fee to put a pretty pot in front of them. So I just was sort of wondering a little more about that. The lane room is $130. And I was just kind of curious if that was comparable to the community center. It seems like community center is a lot more expensive than the lane room. So I just thought we should kind of maybe reconcile that a little bit. Let's see. Okay, go ahead, keep going.
I will say on that, I think there's a little bit of supply and demand on it.
Yes, I totally agree. But that was just again, something I noticed. Okay, this was something that I think is a little bit important. So in a lot of the work that I'm doing, where we have rental facilities, including nonprofits and like various different nonprofits that have rental space, we've done away with the security deposit notion. And the reason we've done away with that is because it's a little prejudicial to people who don't have a lot of money. So to have to put $1,000 security deposit up for a building rental for a lot of small organizations like a Cub Scout group or something is really high. And so what the model that the nonprofit world is working toward is you sign a contract, there's no deposit, but if there's damage done or something that needs to recoup, you simply bill and they pay the bill. The bill then is directly related exactly to what happened. And there's no arbitration around, giving them a little money and not a lot, and, negotiation around that. And so it saves a lot of administrative time on staff, having to take the check in, document it, give the check back, cutting it, so that people aren't out for like 4 to 6 weeks without their money. It takes away some financial biases, and it also, with the billing situation, it's a more direct linkage to what happened. And if they don't pay their bill, then they are not able to rent the property again or the facility again. That's sort of the thing. And I will tell you, in the 2 big properties that I work with in the last 5 years since we've gone to this, we have never once not been able to recover. Some people have always been willing to pay if there's a problem. I don't even know, we may not even have that often where we take money away from people for security deposit, but just again, something to think about for the future around a little bit around kind of practicality and that kind of thing. I've also been being told by a lot of our residents, they feel like our community center fees are very high for residents, and it's just feedback. We can talk, Margaret, we can maybe Park and Rec Foundation, the Park and Rec Commission can look into it a little bit in comparison. But I've had a number of people tell me that they haven't rented the community center again because the fees are very high. So if the lane room stays low, maybe we offer that as another alternative. Bayside lights are $43 per hour. I don't know when the last time we raised those costs are, but as a member of Peninsula Clean Energy, I can see what our rates are going up significantly. So I just want to make sure we're still covering that cost. And then there's a typo on page 56, wedding facility rental. It's empty right next to it. It says something like, is this included in a facility rental? So it looks like if you rent the facility, you might get to use the yard for free. There's like a little typo in there. It's on page 56. Page 56. Page 57, film shoots. It's kind of strange. Corporate and commercial are lower than documentary. And I just felt like documentaries, we should encourage documentaries, especially since a lot of our students do documentaries. It seems to me documentaries should be a little lower, and commercial and corporate feature films should be a little higher. I'm skipping a few that I can just send them to. There's a reservation cancel fee of $8. And again, sometimes people have to cancel for whatever health reason or something. And I just want to make sure, again, we're not, overly charging people. Checking on our trees. We have an hourly rate, I think, to go out when people come ask for a private tree review or something. It looks like it just seemed low. So that's on page 60. There's two typos on page 67. The word should be fewer. We use less, but I think Lisa would agree with me. The word should be fewer. Okay. I'll save that for the end because it's kind of a big one. Just checking on and reminding us all, we had talked about our affordable housing impact fees and wanting to check and see if we wanted to change the commercial linkage fees to be a little higher someday. So just a tickler and a reminder. And then I had another one on page 74. There was taxi operator fees, and it looked like there was nothing in there about Lyft and Uber. And I just wanted to understand the difference between how taxis are charged in business licensing fees for taxis versus Uber and Lyft to make sure that everybody's fair. And one person who might really be able to help us look at that is Athen Rabelos, who operates a taxi company and might have some good shared information and knowledge. It just looked odd that we were charging all these taxi fees, but nothing for Uber and Lyft. And then the last thing, we just finished a report for One Shoreline, and they posed a really interesting kind of solution to the conversation we've been having around bayfront and having to have people pay for the bayfront amenities versus the inbound properties. And there was a suggestion that some cities or public policy working groups have suggested possibly linkage fees for sea level rise, which is kind of an interesting concept because it could be the way we could potentially capture some of the cost and spread it on the inbound people that aren't on the outbound. So One Shoreline, Len Matterman put some work together about that, Kevin. We might want to take a look at what he's thinking about. And I don't know if it will, I don't think it would need a nexus study of some sort of another. It might need some things like that, but it was just something that I saw that I wanted to bring up to colleagues. Sorry, that big list.
Can you clarify outbound and inbound? Just so I know.
Pardon?
Can you clarify outbound?
Oh, okay. So like Divco's property is an outbound because it's on the shoreline. So in getting redeveloped, it's paying for like the Bay Trail and things like that. If you're on the other side of Bayshore Boulevard, you're inbound toward 101, but you're still going to reap the benefit of the investment that those shoreline people are making much higher than you are. And so how do we try to share that cost or capture in order to fill the gaps that the city of Burlingame is going to be responsible for and may not be able to pay for, as just a way to think about it. So what they were suggesting is you get, like if you're on the bayfront, you get the option, you either pay the fee or you do the work, or if you're on the inbound, you just pay the fee.
Yeah, yes, Madam City.
Sorry, if you want to finish that thought, and then I have a kind of a process suggestion.
Okay.
Sorry, that's it. I'm done.
I was just going to say I would endorse, I mean, I figured at some point we were going to need to talk about how we start paying for sea level rise. And, but not being agendized, I think we have to be
Correct.
not
Right.
Yep.
too much of that from the dais. But I think the point is a really good one. And it is absolutely the case that, a bathtub protects everybody inside the bathtub too. So it's not, I think that's an important observation. But Madam City Manager.
So there were a lot of suggestions and
Sorry.
corrections in there. That's okay. For process, I might suggest that you go ahead and adopt the master fee schedule tonight as is. We can make the little typo correction, but not any substantive corrections. And then Vice Mayor, if you wouldn't mind passing off your list to staff, we can look at them because some of them sound like they might need a little bit more analysis. And I don't want us to just react blindly for something we haven't thought about at all. And then if there are things that we think merit changes to the master fee schedule, we can bring back those changes. Some of them might are probably relatively easy, but some of them actually require a conversation with the council. And so that will take us time to figure all of that out.
That makes sense. Councilmember Beach.
Thank you. I think that process sounds eminently reasonable that the city manager proposed. I do think that the discussion and analysis of the pros and cons and impact of electrification fees for those appliances is a worthy discussion, not to punt for a year. You know, so even if we have that later this summer or June or July, and then we amend later, I think that's an important enough issue if we really are prioritizing it. Streamline and make it easier for people to do like electrification, because those can be significant, particularly the ones that are more expensive, that are hard to just justify economic. Just make it a little bit easier. So I would welcome that discussion, and then we can evaluate the merits or how that impacts the city.
So from a legal point of view, if we were to decide in the middle of this coming legislative year to amend the fee schedule, is that a very complicated process?
We'd go through the same thing we went through. We'd have to, put it on the agenda with the changes and then bring it back a month later for you to adopt it.
Okay, well, that doesn't seem too hard. So we all know the iceberg.
I know.
But
Sorry, I'm very sorry, Lisa.
That's okay.
That makes sense. Any other comments? Thank you very much, Vice Mayor Colson, for going through that so carefully. It's helpful, very helpful. I think we're going to move forward as is, if I understand, minus typos,
Correct.
but we will engage both for next year, but maybe even.
Might be some interim changes, but we'll need to talk about it. But there may or may not be people in the public who want.
I'm sure there are people frantic to talk about our master fee schedule. Anybody in the audience? Seeing none, is there anyone online?
We have no attendees and no emails.
Okay. Thank you, Director Scott, for the presentation and for keeping the fees reasonable and mostly right.
Thank you. Thank you. It's all the department work together collaboratively. And I think maybe this is too premature to talk about it. You know, we did include some master study budget in the upcoming fiscal year. So we are planning to do a comprehensive study in the fiscal.
Excellent.
Yeah, 20.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Great timing. Okay, so we need a resolution. Yes, would anyone like to make a resolution to approve this master fee schedule?
Move to approve, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Thank you. Motion by Councilmember Beach, seconded by Vice Mayor Colson. If we could do roll call.
Councilmember Stevenson,
Yes.
Councilmember Beach,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Colson,
Yes.
Mayor Brownrigg.
Yes, and so the measure passes 401, but again, appreciate very much the ability to make it better in the near term. That takes us on to 9B, which is the Broadway Area Business Improvement Assessment. I forget who runs this one, also you.
Yeah.
Okay, Director, please.
Good evening, Mayor and Council Member again. Also at the April 3rd meeting, the City Council approved resolution to intend to hold tonight public hearing also for Broadway bid assessment for fiscal year 23-24. Tonight, council asked to conduct a public hearing. As of 5 p.m. this afternoon, the city only received one per test, 1 out of 99 notice. I don't know if the city clerk you receive any additional or.
Just the one.
Okay. So out of the 99 notice we mail out, we only receive one, so which is does not constitute majority. So therefore, staff recommend adopt the resolution approval assessment. With that, I'm here to answer your question.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for staff? Seeing none, I'll open up the public hearing. I see nobody in the audience clamoring to speak. Is there anybody online?
We have no emails and none of our attendees with their hands up.
Okay, then no public comment tonight. In which case, I don't think there's much more to talk about. I'd welcome a motion to approve the resolution.
Mr. Mayor, I'll. It's hearing, I guess. Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to approve the adoption of the Bay Area Business Improvement or Broadway Area Business Improvement Assessment for this next fiscal year.
And I'll second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. A motion by Councilmember Stevenson, seconded by Councilmember Beach. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Stevenson,
Yes.
Councilmember Beat,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Coulson,
Yes.
Mayor Brownrigg.
Yes, and so the motion again passes 401. Thank you very much. For
Thank you.
the organization. That takes us now to a more open-ended item, which is a discussion of street closures, which the Economic Subcommittee did have a conversation about. And I think we surfaced some good data, and our staff has also done a useful survey. And we recognized that it needed to be talked over at council. So I'll hand this over to Director Gardner.
Thank you, Mayor Brownrigg and members of the council. Yes, tonight we are here to talk about possible community event street closure programs for Burlingame Avenue in particular. I'll provide some context on that. But first, for the context, where we started with this, the city did experiment with street closures in 2020 as a response to the COVID pandemic. It was successful in many respects. Some people really liked it. Business community was maybe split, but it was particularly with residents, a popular thing. At that time, a decision was made to pivot to parklets, which seemed to be a little better response for the particular nature of the health orders that were in effect at that time, which provided space for restaurants to open, be open for business, and not have as much of the particularly the labor in setting up and breaking down the street closures. So at that point, the street closures were terminated in favor of the parklets. But as mentioned, a lot of people did like the street closures. It was kind of a festival atmosphere, and there was a thought and a promise to revisit the topic as the pandemic would end. So at this point, with the public health emergency ended in February, we're here to revisit the item. As mentioned by the mayor, the Economic Development Subcommittee, which is Mayor Brownrigg and Vice Mayor Coulson, discussed this item in their March meeting and wanted to gauge public interest. The Broadway bid said thanks, but not really interested, whereas the downtown bid was interested, as well as the Chamber of Commerce. So at that point, direction was given to do a survey of the businesses in the DBID, Downtown Business Improvement District. So that's much of what I'll discuss here. We can have the slides, please. Next, please. So just for the members of the public or people who aren't familiar with the numbering system on Burlingame Avenue, we talk a lot about the different blocks, 1100 block, 12, 13, and 1400. So 1100 goes from California Drive at the train station to Lorton Avenue. 1200 goes from Lorton Avenue to Park Road. 1300 goes from Park Road to Primrose Road. And then 1400 is the really long block that goes from Primrose Road to El Camino Real. Next, please.
Sorry, it's just as a comment, that map is way out of date.
It is out of date. That's from
That Safeway is the old
plan.
Safeway combo with the drugstore.
You're right. Yeah, I was trying to find a nice figure ground that was a really clear graphic, but that's pretty old. We actually had
Doesn't matter at all. It's
South Lane was on there as well. I point that out. But, in any case, the point is the 1100, 12, 13, 14. So in the questions that we asked, there were 45 responses for 45 people responding. Not all of them responded to every single question. So you'll see some of the percentages don't add up to 100 because of the skipped. But in terms of starting with who was answering the survey, it was pretty even across the different parts of the different blocks of Burlingame Avenue as well as Park Road. There was a fair number of responses. Half of the responses were from people or businesses not on Burlingame Avenue or Park Road. Next, please. This is where seems like so many things nowadays are split down the middle, and sure enough, here we are. I would say about half of the respondents support long-term multi-week closures, and the other half do not. Next, please. In terms of where do you think the best place for a closure would be? This would be for predominantly people who thought the closure is a good idea in the first place. A lot of people, 40% of the respondents said all of Burlingame Avenue. But then there was probably the next two groups were either the 12 and 1300 blocks. So that would be between Lorton and Primrose, or Park Road. And Park Road is interesting. That is where the street's already closed for the fresh market. So I think some people saw that maybe that's the right venue. But as you can see, there's another nearly 50% who said other. Most of them said nowhere, but some did mention some other locations, Primrose Road, or maybe a parking lot, or different locations around town.
Everybody wants you to close somebody else's block.
Exactly. Like to be adjacent, but not on that. Next, please. In terms of how long should the closure be, we asked 2, 3, 4 weeks, or not at all. So the most popular was 4 weeks. The 2 weeks also had a good representation. And then we had 42% who said rather not do it at all. Next, please.
So the most popular was actually, I'd rather not do anything at all. I mean, not.
Well, so what's tricky with that, if you go back, it's a little deceiving because you really have to add. So if you put all the other percentages together, it's like that same even again.
Yeah, it's
So we-
even again, right? Okay.
S's and to breathe. But it is worth mentioning, it's, this has been an issue with the street closures at the time, as people really liked them, some people really did not like them, and we're kind of sad.
So just before you keep going, I was going to wait till the end, but can you just remind us who we surveyed?
So this would be members of the DBED. So these are all business owners.
Business owners in the downtown, in the Broadway downtown, Burlington Avenue
Burlingame.
downtown core.
We have had past surveys where we've asked the general public. So in this case, we really wanted to focus in on, is the business community going to support this?
Yeah.
And they're the most impacted, they would have the most to gain, but also the most aggravation if they don't like it. So we want to talk to them specifically. This is probably a longer term. This would not apply for this year. The question is, should there be street closures with the parklets in place? This year, if there was a street closure this summer, for example, the parklets are still there. They're going to be there till at least next year. So, but kind of longer term thinking is 52%. So a little more than half thought that street closure should not occur while the parklet's in place. And that's maybe something to think about for next year. So those were the main questions. There were also a lot of open-ended. I'm not going to go over those. There's many, but that's in your staff report. So people who said other or no or yes or whatever, you'll see that there's a range of comments in there. We're here to gauge the rest of the council. I think I welcome further comments from Mayor Brownrigg and Vice Mayor Colson as members of the Economic Development Subcommittee as well. If you want to add anything to this, but we're here to see what the sentiment of the council is.
I do want to add one postscript to the director's good report, which is in any iteration that we considered, we didn't really consider them, but we all agreed that if there were street closures, we would not close the cross streets again.
Correct.
That was a real problem. And so just to be clear, if any of these different iterations were to happen, there'd still be allowed to have cross traffic, because that created a real mess for people running into a kind of dead end and having to turn around by Phil's Coffee, for example, or something, trying to do a 3-point turn and stuff. So just to add that part. And then I guess just since I have the microphone, I would say that, there's clear trade-offs, and that's why we wanted to have this as a conversation here. And for me, one, that when you actually read the comments, the hostility is they're more verbose on the hostility side than on the warm side. And so I just wonder if it's lukewarm or really, really excited. And then the other thing I just wonder about is when we closed the streets in 2020, they were really popular, but it was also when everyone was locked up. I mean, there's nowhere to go, nothing to do. And so I just think we have to ask ourselves how popular it would be. Anyway, so those were what we were wrestling. Vice Mayor, do you want to add anything before engaging?
Now, the other concern I always have about this is that the DBID does a really good job of getting out and meeting with clients, but I know we have more than 45 businesses downtown. And I'm always a little worried that the ones who are going to be the most unhappy are the ones that don't participate in the surveys. So they're a little biased. The people who really want this jump in, do the surveys. The people who get them, and I know this from talking to people, I've talked to businesses, they go, you guys are going to do whatever you're going to want to do. And they throw it away and they say, I'm not even filling it out. I'm going to be mad. So I'm a little worried that these sometimes are biased toward not including people who would not want it.
Yes, Councilmember Steer.
Mayor Brown,
Get
thank you.
stuff.
So, first of all, Director Gardner, thank you for the data. Is there data that shows the thumbs up, thumbs down by where the business is on those blocks? I'd like to understand the kind of the granularity of the feedback, and maybe that's partly the comments. But I also think the concept of closing streets in COVID is one thing. I think this is a broader discussion about what makes sense for Burlingame overall, independent of that period of time, which made sense given the need for the businesses to have parklets and also for the public to feel like they have a place to go outside. But there is a lot of movement in many, many communities similar to Burlingame where streets are being closed. And I wonder if we need to take a step back and actually spend time educating the options and for the business. Because I think if I got that survey and I own a business and I just think about the parking spot in front of I'll say no. But if I understood that there was actually economic benefit to my business because it was a blocked off street from car traffic and there was more walking, then I might feel differently. So I wonder if we need to actually spend time researching on what makes sense, what other communities have done, not just here in the US, but maybe overseas, and what is the economic impact? Because I think you always have this split without it, in my view. I mean, you're gonna have people that, like the restaurants love it, especially if you close the streets and they don't need the parklets anymore. They could set up their tables all the way out on the sidewalks. You go down to Murphy Avenue in Sunnyvale, which I was just there a week ago, that's permanently closed. And it is packed. Now they have a disproportionate number of restaurants on that street. But, I just think there needs to be kind of a master plan around whether or not this makes sense. That's my view.
Fair enough. Councilmember Beach?
Are we doing questions and or just comment, or just questions, or are we doing comments right now?
I think it can be either one. This is
Okay.
a conversation, really. We will open it up to the public, but I think this is a chance for either one.
Yeah.
And it won't be your only chance.
Sure. No, I appreciate the research and the work that the Economic Development Subcommittee did. But before I forget to mention this, I do think if we're going to have cross traffic through, I know we're all thinking this, we really got to make sure that there's traffic calming and real safety for the pedestrian culture if we do shut down the streets, because that could be a big accident waiting to happen where people feel very safe and they feel like it's a pedestrian promenade and they're checking their phones and they're not paying attention to cross traffic. So the more we can slow down the automobiles, hopefully our Public Works Department can be creative with temporary infrastructure. Yeah.
If I could just add one other PS just before you go on, which is one of the other things I think we agreed was, and why you saw those blocks, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, was Public Works made it clear they didn't want to be putting up the barriers, taking down the barriers, putting up the barriers. So an iteration that isn't possible is closing it for this weekend and then next weekend and then the next weekend. Like that's not feasible.
That's hard to do.
So one of the reasons you saw those time things was, because you could say yes to a 2-week block, you could say yes to a 3 or 4 week or whatever. I just wanted to add that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. to Councilmember Stevens's point, I think it would be really valuable to understand for communities that maintained their closures, what were the economic, why did they do it? Was it just because it was fun, or did the businesses really end up thriving and experiencing? I've heard some of that anecdotally, but it would be, I think, good to have that information be part of our thought process and conversation, whether that's here in the Bay Area or in the Pacific Northwest or in other communities around the world. I think that would be, but people that have experimented with roadways that were former car thoroughfares like this, like a similar type of environment. Not that it's always been that way for 100 years, but what is the data showing? Change, my other comment is change is really hard, and experimenting with new things is hard, and people, it's our human nature to be resistant to change. I do think it's really important that we're talking to the businesses and listening and considering their input. If we do make a change, I think it's important, if we do experiment with it, I think it's important we do it for long enough to let it take hold a little bit to see how it actually works. So rather than just doing a 1 or 2 week, let's do it for a month or so, or 6 weeks, and see, because it's going to require some training for the community to realize it's there, and experience it. So those are my comments as far as the thought process. No surprise, I lean into trying it. I think it's worth experimenting, but I do want to make sure we're being thoughtful about it. And I would welcome some more data from why other cities have continued to do it or not do it.
I'm going to go to Vice Mayor Coulson. I would ask though, if the city clerk could put the slides back up and put the map up, because that'll be one of the questions we have to wrestle with too. Vice Mayor.
So two things. First of all, I think one of the streets that was missing, if you own a business in Burlingame, is located, they have this, but there was a number of comments about Lorton Avenue being a lot of restaurants as opposed to retail, and them requesting that that would be a good location. I think the one business that's heavily retail on that street is Kearns, and they would probably be the least, I think they'd actually be very upset about it. But when I talk to businesses and go in and meet with them and chat on the avenue with different people, what I'm definitely seeing is if you're a business that sells sort of bulky or larger items like art or clothing, expensive clothing, and you're attracting people from San Francisco and other places, and they can't come down and they can't park, your clients are gone, done. They will not come down. They will not walk down. They will not park and walk. If you're selling smaller things, maybe plants and mugs and stuff like that, and it's more, traffic-y kind of walking in and just sort of shopping and buying, little thises and that's, paper place like that. Those businesses, I think, have seen, it's probably the biggest complaint that I have heard is that the people who come down for these street closures do not shop at the shops. They come down to maybe eat, and they come down to, walk and enjoy the outdoors, all great things. But the heavy duty retailers have been very vehement about expressing to me personally that this will be the death of their business. And they have been very uninterested in it. I think that, the parklet, there's this combination question between the parklets and the closure of the streets. I do think when we get the post office online and we have the new 268 parking spots under there, and that construction is cleared up, I think it will be easier for people to say, well, I can park downtown 5 in the evening or on the weekend, and the street closure won't be as impactful. So those are just the sort of anecdotal things that I've heard from the shops that, many of the shops that I peruse and ask on the Ave.
So for me, in terms of commentary, I guess, actually, before I do that, because I've said a couple things, let me go ahead and open it up to public comment just to see if we have any. Nobody in the audience. Is there anybody online, Madam Clerk?
We do have a hand raised from John Kavradian, so I'll go ahead and unmute.
Great.
John, you can go ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. Just a suggestion. Burlingame Avenue and most business districts over the weekend, they're busy the way it is. And they attract people from out of town, as Vice Mayor Colson mentioned. Why not maybe have a road closure on a Monday and Tuesday, or Tuesday, Wednesday, slow days, to attract people to come out to the downtown and patronize the businesses during slow days? That would be my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cabrini, and appreciate it. I will just reiterate that closing a street is actually really complicated for a lot of reasons. And so that option of a couple days here or a couple of days there and then restoring the street is very challenging for city staff. I think is fair to say, but appreciate the comment. Is there any other public comment?
We have no other hands raised, and let me just check email once more.
In which case,
We have no email.
no email. So in which case, I'll close the public hearing and go back to the conversation. The thing I wrestle with is it isn't just up to the business people. I mean, obviously they have an economic stake. They're paying high rents, as somebody pointed out, but it's also the people of Burlingame. And they did have a lot of fun, and we all had a lot of fun. So I'm inclined to experiment, but on the shorter side. So I would be in favor of a 2-week experiment, but then you have to pick the blocks. I don't think we need to do the entirety of Burlingame Avenue. And I will say that one of the comments said this, but I do find B Street in San Mateo to be a mixed bag. I mean, very, very often it's very empty. Feels empty. That's not a good feeling. You know, when people congregate, they want to see other people. It's kind of why you do it. And another one of the comments said, we're going to have actually the vice mayor just said it, we're going to have the town square. That's going to be a great place to congregate. That said, I'm interested in experimenting with a small closure. I'd like to kind of see how it worked. Yeah, Councilmember Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would also personally like to see us experiment and learn from that, and then apply that into a longer term plan where, some of those elements could actually be a good balance between what the business community and what the residents need. But I also think, the idea that you were expressing, Councilmember Beach, about looking at what other communities have learned from what they've done. A lot of it's been a response to COVID, I get, but there's also ones that have made a pretty bold decision, and streets are now permanently shut down. And not just with barriers. There's no car traffic, for example, on South Murphy in Sunnyvale. And just, inquire with their council, what has been the business community response to that? How has it helped? How has it not? And make sure we are keeping our ears to them.
Appreciate that. Yeah, Councilmember Beach.
Yes, I think, and even San Carlos, right, didn't they? They're sort of a similar community. They took a very small portion. And, maybe that's the right way. Maybe just start small so that, one of the big complaints with the businesses was there's no parking in front of my business, and there's rarely parking in front of anybody's business, I suppose. But I guess the one thing that, and I read every comment in here, the good and the bad and the different, and it really is pretty equally divided. There is more hostility towards the negative, but it does show half the businesses are open to the idea or enthusiastic. So that gives me some comfort. And I guess the one other thought, and I know I should have asked this before, but I don't think our new parking garage is at full capacity. I feel like it's still got some room.
I'm glad you said that. I mean, if there's one conclusion I would draw from these comments is we need to do a better job of signage because so many people are like, there's no parking. Well, there's plenty of parking. I think we need to do a better job of directing people, but
So there's still pretty consistent capacity. But maybe it's that we start small, or maybe we get some more data on other cities first, but there has to be reason cities kept them open. And I remember even hearing some anecdotal information from San Carlos. At first, a lot of those businesses were super frustrated by it. A little bookstore, and thought it was going to be the end, but then they collaborated with the coffee shop and they created a story time, and then it's stuck. And now people have coffee and have story time on Saturdays, and it's become a community gathering space. So there's some success stories, and it's got to be the right block and it's got to be the right mix. But I think if we could come up with that, I would lean into trying, because to your point, Mr. Mayor, the community did love it for the most part. And I do think we would need to survey thoroughly afterward, not only businesses, but also survey afterward the community and try to look at that data after the experiment and see, was it devastating to the businesses, especially now that we're sort of beyond the crazy pandemic. We can kind of see how did it impact their return, and how did the community experience it? Was it just a whole bunch of visitors that came? Did the residents come out, and what did they think?
just before I go to the vice mayor, Madam City Manager, what guidance would you have for us in terms of when we have to make this decision by?
I mean, we don't have to make the decision until, a month out, I would say, so we can do some adequate notification of folks, and we would probably start our planning before that, but we would certainly want to give the public advance notice and the businesses advance notice. I did just want to let you know that Syed just let me know that at Thursday around 1:30 PM, there were only 28 unoccupied spaces in the garage.
Oh.
People are finding it.
Good news back on that.
Right.
Thank you for the information. So I would say that we may wind up continuing this conversation to the next meeting, but Vice Mayor Coulson.
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to make a pragmatic suggestion about what we should consider. So I think one, we hadn't really thought about this, but one maybe option is sort of a T, like the 1300 and 1200 M Park. And the reason is because if you look at what's already on 12 and 13, so first of all, for traffic ingress and egress, you can still go down the 1400 block and make a turn at Primrose on either side, and you can access Lorton from either side. Park is an awkward situation in that even if you close off the 1300 and the 1200, then you end up with that dead end situation again at Park. So it actually makes pretty logical sense to close Park off at Howard. And if you look at what's on here, it's basically restaurants, and the other thing you have like the pets food store, and you have the hardware store and a few jewelry stores, but you have an adjacent parking lot, right? A large parking lot right at City Hall Lane. So people can park there and access, and there's one here. So there's two big city parking lots right here within many people just go straight to those anyway. So you're not going to be losing a ton of stuff. We're also going to be experiencing some really heavy construction along in here. So it might actually be helpful to, Sarah's Regis. And we already shut this for Sundays, and we already shut it for Thursdays. So that's one sort of option. And if we were to do 2 weeks, what I would suggest is we stretch it over 3 weekends. So it's a weekend, a week, a weekend, and a week. It captures 3 weekends, but 2 business weeks. And we consider doing it on the week of the Chamber Fair, which is August 22nd. So it would be the week, because we're going to shut it down anyway for that. Right. It's going to be shut down anyway for that anyway. So the weekend before, the week precluding, and then the week after, and the weekend after. That would be my proposal if we were going to, and the reason I'm proposing it so sort of aggressively is because I want to give the staff time to vet that and see if it makes sense. So that would be my and I think this is what the chamber had suggested.
Appreciate the specificity just for the record. So Vice Mayor Colson's drawing is the block of Park Avenue that we already shut for the farmer's market, and then the block either side on Burlingame Avenue. So the 1200 and 1300 block is the drawing. Thank you for the precision of the suggestion. Any quick reactions from colleagues? Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I like that idea. I would encourage that when we give notice, that we ask the businesses to provide feedback. In other words, it's like, it's not passive. It's like, we're doing this, but we really need your feedback, the good, the bad, whatever it is, that those all will participate in a post-event survey. Not just the public or not just kind of random folks. It's somehow, if we could encourage them to participate, I think that would be helpful.
Thank you for that. Councilmember Beach, any quick reactions?
No, I like it. I think definitely the businesses, I think Sarah Regis to weigh in about that too. And I don't know if there's any merit in a partial park road. It seems that would cause more chaos than the whole park road, but just open to if there's a compelling reason from a safety perspective or a flow perspective, but I think it makes sense, the full T. And I appreciate Councilmember Colson's, Vice Mayor Colson's suggestion.
The chamber event is which weekend?
It's around August 21st, that like third weekend in August.
21st.
So
The 21st is a Monday, so I think. the-
19th and 20th, which is kind of a good weekend because school kids are going to be back. People will be back in town like the weekend, it's kind of like, I think high school goes back like right.
Marks like it's.
Yeah, it kind of marks the fall,
So-
kickoff.
A quick thought experiment, not to belabor this, but you proposed having it in the middle of the 2 weeks, which makes a lot of sense. If you were to start with it, then you would wind up finishing on Labor Day.
Yeah.
That's
I'm open
a nice idea.
So maybe that kicks off the road closure.
And that might be something that we want, Joseph Sample about it, just reach out to we could start working on that and then maybe talk to these businesses and ask them, like, if we're going to do it, would you like Labor Day? And maybe that's their biggest weekend of the year. They're terrified to have that shut. Maybe it's kind of a slow weekend anyway. And they're like, yeah, you know what? That might be a great way to drive some business in.
The fall.
When people are off from work, and yeah, I think that's.
So if I might, what I would suggest, Madam City Manager, is I think this has been a good conversation. Thought, grist for the mill for the Director of Planning and Urban Development. Maybe we agendize this for next council meeting.
Sure.
Only so that we can make these decisions. And so that's what we'll do. We'll bring this back and we'll
We'll have Public Works do a little vetting of the suggestions as well.
okay.
The map.
So, sorry, you're talking about starting it the weekend of the chamber event, is that correct? And then, so you'd have 2 weekends and.
I think the consensus seems to be 3 weekends, 2 weeks. And then whether the chamber event is the middle weekend so that you don't step on Labor Day, or it's the first weekend so that you do reach Labor Day. I think that actually might be kind of
Important.
kind of helpful, because a lot of people go away on Labor Day, so it's kind of nice to bring people downtown.
Okay.
But I think we're all probably pretty agnostic if somebody had a real allergic reaction to that, but
Basically 16 days.
Yeah.
Cover that.
I think that's actually a good idea. I personally, I'd probably lean into, like, we shut it down, people come down, they have fun with the fair. So it kind of gives them like, oh, that was so fun. It was shut down. And then we say, guess what? We're going to hold it down for 2 more weeks. And then the Labor Day weekend is a really good weekend for the restaurants to sort of pour out. And I think more of the sort of, heavy duty retail people, their clients are often gone on 3-day weekends. So it's like tourism business a little more.
right.
So that might be a really nice way that we could promote it, like come down, come spend Labor Day with us. Maybe we even look into music or bands or something.
Yeah, and that's where I was going to go with this as a final thought, which is I think it's important if to ask our Park and Rec director to also opine on how hard it is to activate the space. because, you know, the chamber event will obviously activate it all by itself, but after that, I don't know, I think it's helpful if there's some reason to come. It doesn't mean that there has to be a train, you know, a toy train every night or something, but I think having
Or that.
something, having something going on in a public space will make it feel, at least, I'd like to at least know if there's some creative ideas about that. That don't cost too much.
It will still be the farmer's market on the Sundays.
Right.
So that's activated on part at least.
That is true.
Mhm.
We no longer have the Facebook stage, just so everyone is aware, because Facebook has laid off all the people who know how to set the stage up. Sadly.
Could we ask them to donate it to us?
I don't think they'll do that.
Any final thoughts from colleagues?
Love the idea of activating it with not necessarily also big band music, but acoustic music can be a lot more pleasant for a lot more people. So that's just my 2 cents. And there's
Acoustic music would be lovely, and
or
no one,
instrumental or whatever.
no one knows better than our leader of all things music, Councilwoman Beach. But the other thing that could be even fun would be to invite like some, like Nancy called Torres, maybe there'd be some people who want to like do some plein air painting out there, painting,
Comedy might be really fun. People are always looking.
or Margaret's losing her mind back there as we're putting her things together. But I'm just trying to think of easy things to do, music and there was one other thing I saw recently that just was
Mimes. Or
no.
You guys have gone a little crazy.
But I think even the restaurants could supply music. Like we might not have to do it ourselves, but we could waive,
Authorize it.
we could waive permitting for music those 2 weeks and ask the restaurants if they would like, you know, to sign up, like, you know, and I'm sure there's a few that would be willing to do that.
I think our public would appreciate it. Okay. Oh, yes.
One quick comment. If parking is a concern, instead of a train, could we run a shuttle? You know, like those long extended golf cart shuttles to bring people from Burlingame Avenue where it's closed to the
Train them to walk,
What's that?
train people to walk.
City council could drive them.
Now we're really, now I'm with the city manager. It's going too far.
It's
All right.
gone a little too far. Remember, we're still coming out of our COVID situation budget wise, so let's just, people can walk a block.
Yeah.
And if they can't walk a block, then we got bigger.
Ride the bike.
Okay.
Big Sam.
Thank you. I think that was a good conversation and I appreciate Vice Mayor Colson, concrete proposal like that. That was really helped shape the conversation. That takes us through the end of our agenda. There are activity reports and announcements attached to the packet, which you're welcome to read. Are there any activities that council members would like to brief colleagues on? Councilmember Beach?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Caltrine, I think it's worth just highlighting a couple things that came up at the local policymakers group. They have hired a new, first time they've ever had one, a safety officer. And it just is a new position this year. They're looking at everything holistically, but it's a big focus looking at tree safety along the coast. But it was an impressive presentation. They are using a military risk matrix standards to really thoughtfully and consistently with a methodology evaluate tree risk along the corridor. I think they're doing a good job. They're being thoughtful and they're paying attention to it and allocating resources. We know that that's certainly impacted Burlingame, but I think it's just something the council should be aware of. If you have questions, communicate with staff as well. They also had a big financial workshop, and we may be hearing a lot in the news about transit agencies with their fiscal cliff and what does this mean? And Caltrain has always really been very heavily dependent on their fare box recovery, meaning ticket sales matter. The good news is, good news, bad news. They have done a lot of calculations. Apparently they have about a 2-year runway before the fiscal cliff really looks tragic for Caltrain. And that's in large part thanks to the voters of San Mateo County and the region for passing Measure RR, which was a multi-county funding source, but also Measure W here in San Mateo County made a big difference. So But after 2 years, they're going to need a lot more additional resources. Tricky time because the state budget has a projected deficit this year, but there's a lot of advocacy going in that space, and we might want to be paying attention to that. If we do want to step in and help advocate, but even just on an individual basis to know that Caltrain's okay for about 2 years. They're also working really hard on their quarter-wide grade crossing strategy. And it's great to see them working on that philosophically throughout the whole quarter. Okay, just those highlights. Thanks.
What is the schedule on electrification?
September 2024.
Okay.
Fully electrified fleet. They are still, they believe, on pace and on target.
Okay.
And it is funded now.
Well, if I may suggest that we should rely on you to let us know if there's a point at which the city should weigh in. Obviously, transit's important to our residents.
Right.
But I think rather than all of us become Caltrain experts, maybe we can ask you to keep us posted on that.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Any other reports from yes, Vice Mayor Coulson?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So I just want to call attention to a document that was produced last week by One Shoreline. It is One Shoreline's draft planning guidance policy to protect and enhance bay shoreline areas of San Mateo County. So this is the work that we did on the bayfront, now codified into a planning guidance policy manual that cities throughout San Mateo County are going to be using and replicating. And I just want to call it out, Kevin, because in the meeting, Len Matterman really gave, and Lisa, Len Matterman really gave our staff incredible accolades for the hard work they did, and how this planning guide would not even be possible if Burlingame hadn't stood up, and our public works people and our Kevin's community development committee staff. If everybody together hadn't gotten together and put all this and worked so closely with Len Matterman and the staff at One Shoreline, it would never have happened. So it's it's like it's a wet, dry read, right? It's, if you will. But it's worth taking a look. It's worth reading. And I just want to point out how appreciative I am of the staff for really leading the way and setting the tone for the whole county, and also the deep levels of gratitude that the other council members, in particular East Palo Alto, expressed, because they are the next city that will be benefiting from this, and we're moving there. So thank you, Lisa. Please share that at your staff meeting.
Thank you for that. Perhaps if you share the link.
Yeah.
That would be great. Appreciate it.
It's on the One Shoreline. Yeah, but I'll forward it to Lisa and she can forward it to everybody.
I think I have it. I can send it out.
That's great. Thank you. Okay. Thank you both for those reports. Those are super helpful. That takes us to future agenda items. Are there any questions from colleagues? Yeah, I will say I have one that I know is going to be on the agenda, so this is an easier ask. But I will comment that with the storms and the trees coming down and so much work happening on El Camino, we got a real world taste of what's going to happen when we actually shut El Camino for a prolonged period. And there was a lot of traffic going in various different directions. So with enough lead time for residents to be able to weigh in, I think it would be good for us to start talking about how we plan to redirect traffic when El Camino goes offline. Because it was hair raising on some of the smaller streets. More of an observation, but
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of coordination with our folks for those emergencies,
yeah.
as far as I understand. So, presumably there'll be a plan in place as opposed to we got to get these trees out of here now and we're going to shut everything.
Well, and I'll tee up one of the questions I have, which I know is not agendized, so I'm just asking it as a question. And that is, we're proposing to put California on a road diet. And there's a little part of me that wonders if the road diet is the best thing to do if you're going to push a bunch of traffic off of El Camino from a timing point of view. Not that it isn't the right project, but it'd be a shame to take lanes offline at just the time when you're pushing a bunch of traffic somewhere else. Does that make sense?
It does, and we won't discuss it.
No, we won't.
But
Question in my,
Syed responded to an email that you wrote him with that question
oh, okay, great.
a couple weeks ago,
Oh,
or
All right.
maybe a week and a half ago.
I apologize.
That's okay. I can dig out that email.
I will look it up. I will find. it.
Okay.
That's on me. I apologize. It's been hectic.
That's okay.
All right. Thank you very much, colleagues. I don't have anyone to adjourn in memory of, if anyone else doesn't. In which case, thanks to our terrific, really first-rate staff. Oh, I will finish with one report out, which was, it was a terrific lunch at Salt Yard to honor a number of our employees, a great mix of men and women, really fantastic, from people from 25 years down to 15. We didn't get to the 10-year veterans, but it was a really nice event, and I think it was appreciated by the people being honored. So anyway. All right, with that, close the meeting.